Introducing National Streaming Sports, live and on-demand sports talk programming that you can access 24/7. Check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and X. And for the premier sports talk experience, tap into our Roku channel. Start your mornings with Mac and Jack covering all the weekend sports action. Then pour a cup and enjoy all the sports you can drink on the Coffee and Sports podcast. At midday, talk sports from east to west on the Coast to Coast podcast. Followed at night by some hot girl talk with Prim and Proper Sports featuring Sonia Pearson. Talk boxing on the Gloved Fist. Yankee fans tune in for Start Spreading the News. And there's more on the College Sports Huddle and Sports Scope with Robert Butler. And that's just a sampling. There are 20 podcasts in all and 70 weekly shows giving us a 3.4-star viewer rating. To find us on Roku TV, search for National Streaming Sports on the Roku search bar. Click on the logo and you're in. For laptops, mobile phones, and tablets, download the Roku app. National Streaming Sports, live and on-demand sports talk for America.
This show is brought to you by BetUS.com. 125% off your first 3 deposits, 30 years experience, secure site, wagering for all sports, including during the games and futures. SeatGeek provides you the best prices on sports and music events, game tickets, and concerts. Use NSS promo code to get $20 off your first ticket. Keep using the NSS promo code when purchasing tickets for great deals in the future. In Fanatics at nessp.info for your favorite teams. Sportswear, click on the link, and while you're there, check out our national streaming sports merchandise. Yes, sir. Welcome to the Memory Show every Saturday, 8 a.m. Eastern on the National Streaming Sports Roku channel, YouTube, and other platforms will be on later. This is a show where we bring you the best of sports history of the individuals, teams, and events from way back when. So today we're gonna talk about 4 people really, but first let's get the World Series update out of the way. The LA Dodgers with a grand slam, bottom of the 10th inning, end up being 6-2. Game 2 tonight, with still in LA. So hopefully the Yankees can tie it tonight, and we'll push on to New York. So Jack, we got Marvin Johnson.
Yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
Go ahead, Jack. Okay, we have Marvin Johnson, pretty good light heavyweight fighter who fought a lot of great fights. And why don't you tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, I mean, that's really cool what we're doing on this show. Like, it's great, really. I mean it. I'm being serious with Marvin Johnson, just reviewing his career. You're not going to hear stuff like this anywhere else. Certain athletes out of the past that are remembered within the boxing community. That was, his sport. But outside of it, people might ask, who the heck was Marvin Johnson? So it's kind of nice to, bring him back to life, even though he's alive today. It's ironic when you ask me, Mac, to talk about Marvin Johnson, because, as you know, and most people don't know, I'm working on a book right now on Michael Spinks. And I was with Michael yesterday, and I was complaining to him and his representative. I can get in touch with nearly anyone. I can get in touch. I got in touch. I'm speaking with Larry Holmes. But Marvin Johnson, one of Spinks' past opponents, it's driving me crazy. Phone keeps ringing. No one picks up. One time someone picked up and I told her what it was about. She listened and then abruptly hung up on me. So that's what I'm kind of dealing with. I mean, I'm going to assume I had the wrong number. I was told now I have the right number. And the call went into Marvin Johnson from someone else. The correct number, voicemail was left, what it's about. So it's a shame no one called back yesterday because I would have tipped off Marvin Johnson to listen to this segment. But he could hear it, on replay, when the time comes. Marvin Johnson was the equivalent of one of these players who's a little short of being a Hall of Famer. A little short, but he's outstanding. But when you say, does he belong in the International Boxing Hall of Fame? Probably not, but he's on the ballot, But he's a little short. He was a 3-time world light heavyweight belt holder. In the 1972 Olympics, he won a bronze medal in the middleweight division. He had lost to the eventual gold medalist during the tournament. He got stopped. He's from Indianapolis, Marvin Johnson, arguably the greatest fighter to ever come out of Indianapolis. So one of, you'd have to, Tony Zale comes to mind from Gary, Indiana. You'd have to rate Tony Zale, former middleweight champion, ahead of Marvin Johnson, but one of the best fighters to ever come out of Indiana. And he won the first 15 fights of his career against good opposition. Normally I don't have to look at a guy's record because I'll remember all his big fights, all his impactful fights. But Marvin Johnson had a lot of smaller fights against really good guys, that people forget about. That's why I'm looking at his record. Like I'm noticing he beat Eddie Davis a couple of times. Eddie Davis was a former light heavyweight contender, fought for the title twice. Matthew Saad Muhammad is a little more remembered for his losses than his wins. 2 great fights against Matthew Saad Muhammad. They were like back and forth, could have gone either way. But Matthew Saad Muhammad forged his reputation in outlasting opponents. You'd have Matthew Saad Muhammad on the brink of defeat, and then he would come back and stop his opponent. But Marvin Johnson, before he won the title, lost the thrilling fight to Matthew Saad Muhammad that he got stopped. And as soon as Marvin Johnson won a version of the light heavyweight title by going overseas and beating an unbeaten fighter, Matt Paulo, a very good fighter, tall southpaw, he insisted on making his first defense against the guy who beat him, who'd handed him his only career loss, Matthew Saad Muhammad. It was a great, great fight, at the Philadelphia Spectrum. I'm taking was the rematch was in Indianapolis. I'm sorry, Marvin Johnson's hometown. First fight was in the Philadelphia Spectrum. And Matthew Saad Muhammad repeated the trick in Indianapolis. It's back and forth, could have gone either way. Saad Muhammad eventually prevailed. But, he had an ability to bounce back, Marvin Johnson, and he knocked out Victor Galindez, the Argentina, strong man who had a long reign as light heavyweight champ. So Marvin Johnson was champion again. But again, on his first title defense, like with Matthew Saad Muhammad, he loses the title to Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, who's a heck of a fighter. But he was durable. He got some wins. Then he ran into my guy, Michael Spinks. And, he was doing okay for 3 rounds. Spinks was ahead on the cards. You could argue that Johnson should have been ahead on the cards if you want, but it all became irrelevant when Spinks hit him with an uppercut and knocked Johnson out in the 4th round. You'd think that was it for Johnson. But again, he started winning fights, and then he won a version of the belt for the 3rd time against Leslie Stewart, but then lost the rematch to Stewart and basically called it a day after that. He had 49 fights, 43 wins, 6 losses, 35 KOs. He was stopped 5 times. His durability was so. I mean, not bad. He took a lot of punches at Saad Muhammad, and he was a heck of a fighter. I like to compare these boxers to athletes in other sports to give people an idea of how good they were. To make a case for Marvin Johnson to go in the International Boxing Hall of Fame would be the same as making a case, you're talking about the Yankees before, for Andy Pettitte.
Right.
Andy Pettit was a heck of a pitcher, but he probably doesn't belong in Cooperstown. But you can make an argument that he does, and no one's going to say, don't be ridiculous. They could see the merit in that argument. And that's what Marvin Johnson was. You know, as a fighter, he was the equivalent of Andy Pettit as far as how good he was.
That's a great comparison and great job, Jack. You know, what I really appreciated, and by the way, you know, he was managed by both our friend Russell Peltz,
Well,
who
promoted
his
by
wing
Russell.
and managed his career. Right.
Well, Russell promoted him. Russell was the manager at the time.
Right. Well, he was very. I know he's very fond of him. He kind of,
in the ways.
Right, and I know he loved Marvin Johnson. He said he always wanted to fight the best fighter available. He never picked and choose like some fighters do who was the best matchup. And you mentioned Muhammad. I mean, the guy is a Hall of Famer, great fighter. And Marvin Johnson's like, come on, you're up first. You're the best fighter. And a lot of fighters don't do that, Jack. I mean, I give him a lot of credit.
Marvin Johnson was unbeaten, and he goes to Philadelphia, Saad Muhammad's hometown, to take him on in a battle between two top contenders. And then, you know, he loses the fight. Marvin Johnson rebounds, becomes a champion, as I said. And he insists his first title defense, he wants to go back with the guy who beat him. You know, he's not like picking and choosing. And, you know, you compare the guys today, I'll compare to someone like Canelo Alvarez. He's picking and choosing very carefully, conservative. They're trying every way not to take a risk. The boxing business today is you take the least risk for the most amount of money, which makes sense, don't get me wrong, but it's not about legacy. It's not about proving that you're the best. You know, that the fighters don't have as much pride today as they did when Marvin Johnson fought. When Marvin Johnson fought, you know, Marvin Johnson had a lot of pride. I mean, I was there. It wasn't just taking fights that he felt he could win. He, you know, would go in with anyone, the very best fighters. And today, you don't have that. All these guys are picking and choosing so carefully. They're so scared of getting beat.
Whether you like Muhammad Ali personally or not, Muhammad Ali didn't back down from anybody either. He wasn't concerned, as you say, about the record, how many losses he had. Joe Frazier, he's the number one contender. I'm going to fight him. George Foreman, the number one contender or the champion, I'm fighting him. Ken Norton, I had problems with him. The first fight, the second, I'm fighting him again. Now I know at the end.
Ali, you're bending it a little. Ali fought everyone. When he fought Foreman, Ali had to fight him. Foreman was the champion.
I agree.
And the Ken Norton fight, he lost the first fight unexpectedly. So he basically had to have the rematch. And by the time they had the third fight, Ali didn't have to fight him in the third fight. But the third fight was close, and then Ali was past his prime, and he avoided the fourth fight. You know, you got to talk on. Ali fought everybody, don't get me wrong. I mean, he went in against anyone. So at the end of the day, he fought the very best throughout his whole career. The last thing I'd mean to do would be to diminish the great Ali. But in certain situations, you know, more or less have to fight a guy because you don't have any, you know, real choice there. At one time or another, virtually every fighter ducks somebody. They avoid someone. Take a fighter like Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar De La Hoya fought virtually everybody. He'd take on every challenge. I give him credit. But there was this fighter, Winky Wright. And Winky Wright had a miserable start from him. And Oscar kind of went out of his way not to fight that one guy. And there wasn't enough of a public demand to pressure him, you know, into it.
Yeah. And
Marvin fought everyone. Yeah,
I know some of the fighters don't fight because their managers say, "Hey, don't fight this guy." And back then, the fighters are like, "I'm fighting the best fighter available. I want to compete against the best," and that's what I respect about the older fighters compared to the newer fighters. So
Yeah, I don't mean to get carried away. I'm going to be honest about it. I remember all the way back in the day when I was young, I'd be around the boxing gyms. I'd hear the same thing. The fighters of today and nothing, that the guys in the past, they talk about the guys in the past and they say, these were men, these were fighters. And now in this era, we're talking so wonderfully about the guys in my youth who the old timers were putting down. I mean, I remember that. So, and 40 years from now, we're going to be talking about the guys of today who would take on all the challenges.
I agree.
Yeah, but Marvin Johnson really did take on all the challenges. This segment's about Marvin Johnson right this moment. Yes. And he really did take on everyone. There was no one I can think who he possibly ducked. I mean, he fought the best guys of his time that were available. You make the fight, you pay him, he signs the contract, and he's, fought. I mean, come on, Saad Muhammad twice, Mike Spinks, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, a host of other contenders. He was a real fighter,
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
You mentioned that those numbers that you mentioned, that doesn't get him in the Hall of Fame at all. I mean, that sounds.
Boxing numbers are deceiving. If you go in baseball, for example, 20 and 10, you're a pitcher, you're considered, like you're Hall of Fame worthy. You do that year after year. You're signing for millions and millions of dollars, free agent bidding. You're 20 and 10 in boxing. I mean, at best, you're a club fighter. Okay, you know what I mean? You're not, records are padded. I mean, a guy could be 27 and 2, and you'll be very skeptical of how good he is. It's just what it is. I mean, boxing records. I know what he's saying. What his record. 43 and what did I say? 6 and it's
43. 35 knockouts, 43 wins.
Yeah. I mean, but his was a validly good record. Because he met quality guys. He's on the ballot for the Hall of Fame. He's on the ballot. But, the numbers, sometimes you need something to get you over the top, to get you in the Hall of Fame. And in boxing, a lot of times you're one fight away from getting in the Hall of Fame. Had he, for example, won the rematch with Saad Muhammad, made a successful first defense, that may have tilted things in his favor. Because in boxing, they say you're one punch away. You're one punch away from the Hall of Fame sometimes. It's like crazy. One fight, you look at boxing also when you vote for someone at the Hall of Fame. The first thing I look for when I get my ballot to vote, defining victories. What pops into your head? The first thing with a guy is there like a monster victory there, and then I kind of start looking at all the other things. And with Marvin Johnson, they're like really good victories, but it's kind of more like a body of work. I'll think, well, he knocked out Victor Galindez. That was great. But he lost the title, a few months after that, again. And, had he beaten Michael Spinks or something at light heavyweight, or, he just comes a little short. Spinks is a Hall of Famer. Matthew Saad Muhammad is in the Hall of Fame, and the reason in the Hall of Fame in large part because they beat the Marvin Johnson types. And had Marvin Johnson reversed it and beaten them, he would be the Hall of Famer. They wouldn't. And Marvin Johnson's on the ballot. There's always a chance he could still get in. There's not a certainty he's not going to get in. But he's been on the ballot some years and hasn't gotten a vote, so I don't think he's ever going to quite get it.
Well, I'm glad he's getting his flowers
on this show.
Yes. And me and James would. If me and James had a vote, we'd vote for Marvin Johnson, and maybe he'd get in. I don't know.
Well, James, you got him in the hall. He votes for him, but he promoted him. So he's a bit partial.
Sure, and everybody knows that. So anyway, James, you've got Hakeem Olajuwon, not only a great, one of the legendary centers of the game, but he was drafted with one of the legendary players in NBA of all time. So, I mean, this is an interesting story. Go ahead, James. Good morning, Richard.
Very much so, Mac. Akeem, the Dream Olajuwon. He didn't start with that nickname because basketball wasn't his first sport. Akeem started out with soccer. He was a soccer goalkeeper at about the age of 15, among other sports that he played. But he started playing basketball. Once he got a ball in his hand, I believe he's quoted as saying that all the other sports to him are obsolete now because he just realized he can do some things that were just phenomenal. That wasn't, that he did. He learned some things from soccer as a goalkeeper. He said soccer allowed him to balance his footwork and his agility along with power and speed. He picked up those things from soccer that would translate into basketball. But he wasn't highly recruited when he was young in high school because I obviously just wasn't known out there. And he's from Lagos, Nigeria. So his coach, who happens to be a friend of Guy Lewis, the coach of the Houston Cougars, he called him up and said, "You got to check this guy out." So they send him on a flight all the way over there to Houston, and no one's there to pick him up at all. He calls and he said, "Coach says you got to take a taxi and get here." And so the taxi rolls up and they see this guy. They said all they see is a foot and then nothing but legs and more legs and more arms. And this small guy just gets out of the cab, and then eventually it's a guy that's like, okay, this is somebody that we can use, and he saw some raw talent in him, so he got a scholarship to the Cougars. He ended up playing there, but he didn't get a lot of playing time in his first season. His first season comprised of about 18 minutes a game, and he averaged about 8 points a game and maybe 6 rebounds. And albeit they still made it to the NCAA Final Four. But they will lose to the eventual. They will lose to the eventual.
NC State. You talk about.
Am I echoing? Is this me? You hear me?
What's that? Yeah,
Sorry.
we hear you.
Okay. So
just echoing.
Yeah. Hold on 1 second. They will lose to the champion in UNC, but the next year. In the mid-season, before the season happens, he wanted to get more playing time, and he wanted to find out how can he be better to get more playing time. And that was when the coach said, "Well, hey, I'm gonna hook you up with this player. I want you to go play in this league against Moses Malone." And Moses Malone at the time was the center for the Rockets, and he was a multi-time MVP. And so he said, that summer when he played against him, that was some of the best training that he had gotten. And it honed his skills, allowed him to play up against such high-level talent to be able to be better for next season. And it was. And they end up, him and Clyde Drexler were noted as being called the Phi Slamma Jamma, the fraternity of slam dunking. And so because these guys would show their prowess in dunking and just all up in the air, just just gliding, like you said, Clyde to glide. And, of course, this is when he got his nickname, the Dream. Coach said because it was a dream to see what he can do on the court. They got to the finals. They played they end up not UNC but NC State. They played NC State and they lost by a tip-in on the last second. And then that's when Clyde the Glide, he left that season. And the next season, Olajuwon.
It was a dunk, actually, at the buzzer. Not a tip-in.
No, well, thank you for telling me that, man. I read it and it said tip-in, but I didn't actually watch it. But it was a dunk in. Okay.
Yeah. What was caught came up. Yeah.
Yeah. They were very sorely disappointed during that time, and of course, Clyde went on to be drafted by Portland, and Olajuwon eventually stayed because he was debating on whether or not he wanted to leave or go back, but he decided to stay for his junior season, and. With him, he was just the dominant force, but they went to the finals again. They went up against Patrick Ewing and Georgetown Hoyas, and another disappointing loss, of course. They, as much as dominant as Olajuwon was, there was just nothing else for them. Georgetown was just too much for him, and they lost. And so he gets drafted. And like you said, he gets drafted in '84, but it wasn't just Michael Jordan. It was Charles Barkley, John Stockton. These were all Hall of Famers in that same draft class. So I'd argue to say that's probably top 3 draft class NBA all time. I don't know. You guys would tell me, but I could say that's probably top 3, if not number 1, with all these guys that you see as Hall of Famers and some of the greatest players in the game. His first year, he was all NBA rookie because he ended up playing with a big guy, 7'4", in Ralph Sampson. Both those guys were both noted as a moniker as the Twin Towers. They played well, man. They played well. The second season that they played, they beat the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. And Pat Riley is quoted as saying, "We put 4 guys on him. We had guys coming at all angles. We had no answer for Olajuwon. He's just such a great player because they ended up beating him in 6 games to get to the finals. And that's when they hit a wall when they met the Boston Celtics. And Boston just had too much for him in the post. They would double and triple team him. You know, McHale and all those guys were just on him, and he just had no answer for them. So they lost that finals. And then the next few years, they would get to the playoffs, but they were 1-5. They were 1-5 in their playoffs since that championship that championship run. They didn't win, of course, but they were 1-5. And so this is when Ralph Sampson got traded to the Golden State Warriors, and then Olajuwon in 91-92 had his worst season, and that was when he had a hamstring injury, and he was quoted as his ownership and management was quoting him. Accusing him of faking the injury with his hamstring, and he didn't quite take that so well. And also, this was a year he wanted to get more money with a contract dispute, so there was strong consideration of trading him. And he and the owner got on the plane together. They hashed out their differences. They didn't trade him. They got rid of their coach there, and they added Rudy Tomjanovich. And that's when under Rudy, his career began. This is where his peak began to show. He had increased point percentage. He had 26.9 points, and he went up in assists as well, in 3.5 assists per game. They got to the second round, and they ended up playing, I believe, Seattle. And they lost, if I'm not mistaken, Mac, if you can correct me. I think they played Seattle in 93, in the 93 season. And then in 94, that's when everything just went up. 94 was their year. And this is the year, mind you, that Michael Jordan was not in the league. But 94, they were just dominant. And they ended up playing, again, a rematch, Olajuwon versus Patrick Ewing, and they went a full 7 series. And that game six, they were down 3-2, and then in that game 6, they were up 86-84. And John Starks had the ball. He was coming up, and he was getting ready to shoot a 3. He shot it, and of course, Olajuwon tipped the ball, and it fell short of the goal. And they ended up going to game 7. Olajuwon had 25 points and 10 rebounds, helping his team to win their first finals. And in that year, that's the year he was an MVP as well. This is the first time ever that somebody got an MVP in the season. They got Defensive Player of the Year. They got MVP as well, Finals MVP. That was the first time anybody had ever done that. And being a Defensive Player of the Year, he was Defensive Player of the Year both 93 and 94. I'll get into those in just a moment. But they also went back-to-back champions in 95. But 95 wasn't such a great season. They ended up being a 6th seed. They didn't show well during the regular season, but they made the playoffs. And they had some struggles early on in the playoffs versus Utah and the 2nd seed in Phoenix. But they beat those guys in best of 5 and the best of 7. And also they got to the finals against, they got to the finals against Orlando, and they end up sweeping them. Olajuwon, man, against Shaquille O'Neal, he averaged 33 points a game. He was just, when he beat David Robinson, the MVP, in the Western Conference Finals, he was just dominant, man. Even though they went 6 games, he was just dominant, and you showed that he probably he got snubbed of that MVP because he was the all-star for both years. The only all-star of Houston team, of both 94 and 95. and they got to the finals and they swept Orlando, and they were back-to-back champions. After that year, they made a few playoff runs, but that you can see Olajuwon, his points started dipping, and he started having some injuries. Eventually, they had Barkley on the team, they had Pippen on the team, and it just didn't. It fizzled out. In the last year with Pippen on the team, they only made the first round. They got ousted, and so Pippen left and went to Portland, and that team got dismantled. And he eventually had one last year in Toronto. It wasn't really had a back issues, and it was his lowest points percentage. And he eventually came back and retired. But ultimately, he finished, man, look, with 30,000 points. 26,000 points, 13,000 rebounds. He leads the league still to this day in block shots, 3,830. He's two-time NBA champion, one-time MVP. He's all NBA first team 6 times, 3 times second team, 3 times third, 12-time All-Star, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. He's got 9 defensive all first team and second team total. And man, he's just to me, he's a top 50 and top 75 anniversary team player. One of the best, man, if not the best center. And I'll be honest with you, I know you guys argued that he's 7 foot, but I'm telling you, standing next to Shaquille O'Neal, Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, those guys are legit 7-footers. He was not tall as them, man. But that's yet to be debated. But to me, one of the greatest to ever do it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, you said something that was thought-provoking a moment ago. When you talk about the greatest centers of all time, no one says that Hakeem Olajuwon was the greatest center of all time. He wouldn't get any votes. But if you said it to someone, no one is going to say, well, that's ridiculous. You know, they're going to respect your answer, at least. Say, I don't think so. Because if you're going to say that Shaq deserves consideration, keep in mind Hakeem Olajuwon would outplay Shaq. I mean, they say styles make fights, styles make matchups, and he was his nickname was the Nigerian Nightmare. He was a nightmare for Shaq. Okay, he gave Shaq fits because Shaq did things very physically under the basket, and Hakeem Olajuwon would finesse Shaq, take him inside, take him outside. Shaq had trouble with Hakeem's footwork, you know, and he kept him off. It was like Shaquille O'Neal off balance. If you're saying if anyone feels Shaquille O'Neal deserves consideration as the greatest center of all time, let's say they want to put him on the level of, Jabbar, Chamberlain, Russell, or put him close to that level, you got to put Hakeem Olajuwon there as well, would be my thought. You mentioned about him going to the University of Houston. I don't have the exact details of the story. I don't remember. I heard it. I think he got off Kennedy Airport, and it was freezing cold. Nothing like he had to live with in Nigeria. And by coincidence, he saw some Nigerian bag handler at the airport, and asked him, said, "This is cold here. Where's a warm place?" He had like 3 places to go to Hakeem, and the bag handler mentioned Houston would be the warmest of like the region. So he wound up going to Houston. I mean, I remember him being interviewed. There was something to that effect.
Really?
He wound up there. Yeah. Like coincidence, seeing a Nigerian bag handler who advised him about the weather, because he didn't want to live in a freezing, cold place. Because, when you grow up in a warm climate, it's like a culture shock, to be in cold weather the whole time. I didn't realize he finished his career at Toronto. Was he just there for last year? He played his whole career in Houston.
Yeah.
There's something Mac and myself talk about. Like, why? Why not let him finish his career with that franchise? Was Toronto offering him so much more money that Houston couldn't match it to keep him around?
I think
I don't understand.
It was a money dispute. I think it was regarding money. Yeah.
So we'll have a dispute with an icon of your franchise. Sit down with him, work something out. If he's being unreasonable, then let him go. But
that's kind of what it was.
You think Hakeem may have been a little unreasonable?
I think it was 13 million versus 18 or something like that. Yeah.
At that time, that was big money. Also, you mentioned when the Twin Towers lost to the Celtics, that they lost in 6 games in the finals. That Celtic team is considered by many to be the greatest of all time. Certainly one of the greatest, that particular Celtic team.
Yeah, I mean,
listen, I got a couple things. First, there's Olajuwon is no Will Chamberlain. He's no Bill Russell. He's no, he's no Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He's not in their class, and neither is Shaq. Really,
he's in that class. He's in that class.
I don't think so.
You could say the others are better. That's fine. He's in that class.
Not even close. Not even close.
Matt,
to
the dream shake is what took Shaquille O'Neal out, like what he was just saying. I mean, that's none of these centers.
Listen, Shaquille was a big bruiser. Shaquille O'Neal had no shot. He was a big bruiser. He wouldn't have been able to stay with Chamberlain. Will Chamberlain holds all the records. There is no way. Wilt would have ran Shaq dog tired. Will Chamberlain is the greatest center easily.
Against O'Neal.
But Wilt never had an answer for Russell.
No, not at all. He outran.
Wilt's thing was he was a powerhouse. No one was stronger than Shaq underneath. Shaq was one of the all-time great centers.
Will Chamberlain, Shaq could not run. Shaq was a flat-footed, fat guy, strong, but he's flat-footed. He was a big guy who banged you underneath.
For a reason. He wasn't fat in his young years. They call him deep.
Let's look. When we get after the show, I will look up Shaq's percentage shooting without dunks. And I guarantee you, Shaq O'Neal could not shoot the basketball. He was an underneath guy. That's what he was. I'm sorry. And he was not.
But no one could stop that. No one could stop that.
Go ahead.
I said no one could stop that, though. I mean, he was just dominant.
No one could stop it.
Listen, guys, I can pick holes in everyone's game. Bill Russell was one of the greatest defensive players of all time. If you want to tell me Bill Russell was the greatest defensive player of all time, fine. I'm good with that. But as a scorer, he averaged 15 points during an era where guys scored more. And he just wasn't a scorer, Bill Russell. He wasn't a scorer at all. He was.
No, I'm talking about Wilt Chamberlain. I'm talking about Wilt Chamberlain, not Bill Russell, Jack. Wilt Chamberlain is easily the greatest center of all time. He holds records today as the greatest scorer of all time. There is no way, and even with Bill Russell, that Shaq could have kept up with these guys. There's no way. He was an athletic. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
he was athletic.
But about Hakeem Olajuwon, just getting back to that, like James, you mentioned the draft where he went number 1 overall. And even knowing what Jordan became at number 3, it was a smart pick for Houston. It was a no-brainer taking Hakeem number 1. First off, he was from the University of Houston. He was a great, great player, Hakeem Olajuwon. So when you hear people talk about that draft, everyone criticizes now Portland for taking Sam Bowie. And I criticized Portland at the time. I'm not doing it on reflection. I thought, how can you do that? Take Michael Jordan ahead of Sam Bowie. He's clearly a better player. But I felt at that time you absolutely take Hakeem Olajuwon ahead of Michael Jordan. Now, had the Rockets taken Jordan, okay, I don't know would they have been any better at all, because the chemistry, there wouldn't have been Scottie Pippen there. I don't think they would have been any better off as a team. And would Jordan have still been the same box office attraction? Maybe a little less so. But imagine Houston did take Jordan 1, then Portland would have taken Hakeem Olajuwon ahead of Sam Bowie at number 2. So think of how that would have played out. And then Sam Bowie probably would have went to the Bulls at number 3. So just think of a decision like that. But Houston made the right call. The 2 years that Jordan was out of the league, the year and a half, Houston won the 2 championships. And there's always talk, who would have won the championships had Jordan stayed with the Bulls all along? I think it would have had a split call.
I think it was split as well.
The Bulls would have won 4 in a row because Houston barely got by a Knicks team that the Bulls always owned. So the Bulls would have won 4 in a row, but I'm convinced Houston would have beaten them the next year when they were a strong team. So the Bulls would have won 7 out of 8 had Jordan stayed there all along.
And one last thing about the Twin Towers, the best thing they ever did was get rid of Sampson. I mean, it hurt him the first 2 years. It doesn't work out. When you have guys that big playing together, it doesn't work because that means you got to move somebody to power forward who should be a center. The Knicks did it with Cartwright and Ewing. Didn't work for them either. I mean, you got one center and your power
But it
forward.
worked for the Spurs.
What?
They worked for the
Oh, you mean
Spurs.
with Duncan?
Yeah.
But Duncan was different than Elijah one. Duncan was more of a less a I don't want to say that. I mean, Duncan was a scorer. You know what I mean? Sampson wasn't a scorer. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that it was, and that's a good example though, James. But anyone that thinks that I'm putting down Hakeem Olajuwon, I'm not. He's one of the greatest centers of all time. I'm just saying let's not put him in Wilt Chamberlain's class.
Okay, let's see. Would he be in your top 5 of centers?
Let's see, Chamberlain, Kareem, Bill, Shaq, maybe. Moses Malone would be up in there. I mean, I say he's got a good argument for top 5.
Moses at his
good.
best. Hakeem over Moses for career, but Moses Malone at his best. You could rate him even number 1 at his best if you want a Moses Malone at his very zenith. I mean, he dominated bar in the playoffs. Yeah.
Let's say top 6. How about that? I give him top 6.
Fair enough.
That's good. That's good. That would be good. So we'll switch it up. We'll switch it off to Major League Baseball about a guy named Ricky Henderson. Ricky Henderson, a little career stats: 279 batting average, 3,055 hits, stolen bases 1,406. He holds the career record for stolen bases, runs, unintentional walks, leadoff home runs, first ballot Hall of Famer, MVP, leadoff hitter for 1999 A's when they won the series, leadoff hitter for the Toronto Blue Jays went to World Series, 10 All-Stars, a Golden Glove, 3 Silver Slug awards, 12-time AL bases stealer. I mean, we talk about Willie Mays. We talk about as far as speed goes. We talk about stealing bases. We talk right now about Ohtani. This guy was the table setter. We talk about Mookie Betts as a leadoff home run hitter. I mean, Ricky Henderson is that and more. He raised heck on the bases. I mean, when he was on the bases, he was going. Everybody knew it. It affected pitchers. It affected the catchers. It affected the way you called the game. I mean, Ricky Henderson, and I remember him playing for the Yankees too, Jack. I mean, can you think of a better table setter than this guy in history? I can't off the top of my head. I mean, this guy was a triple threat on the bases and hitting the ball and with home runs. How do you start off a game with Ricky Henderson looking at you? I mean, Mookie Betts scares everyone. This guy was unbelievable and a good outfielder, super fast. I mean, Jack, can you think of a better table setter than Ricky?
I just want to say, you mentioned a great point. I mean, when we're talking about the base stealing, could you imagine under today's rules, the pitchers only allow 2 throws to first base to hold the runner close. On the third one, if you don't pick them off, it's considered a balk, and the guy's automatically given second. And they kept throwing over to keep Henderson close, when he played. They'd only be allowed 2 throws. He would force the pitcher to basically use up his bullets, his throws. And then, and he'd be awarded second. So he, in this day and age, he would have put even more pressure on the pitcher than he did before. Even Billy Martin loved Henderson, who Henderson played for him. They got along great. And Henderson, was he? I don't recall, Mac, whether this is true or not. Was he given a little bit of a rap for sometimes not putting out 100%? Am I thinking of someone else?
No, he did. He did have a lot of people thought he had an attitude problem. I think that came from the media because Henderson was like a quiet guy. He just kind of kept to himself outside the locker room. But I remember something like that where they said he dogged it a couple times or something. I don't understand it. The thing that surprised me was his career batting average. I didn't know he hit that high for average. I knew he had some power. I knew he was fast, but you're talking almost a 279 batting average for a career is not that bad in the 3,055 hits, Jack.
You know what? I don't remember offhand. Maybe our producer could look up a quick. How many times did he walk on certain seasons? Because at that time when Henderson played, we thought less about on-base percentage and more about batting average. But now we know on-base percentage is more important. If you get up 4 times and you go 0 for 2 but get 2 walks, and then if he stole a couple of bases besides, that's a productive game, in this day and age. But back in the day, they'd look, oh, well, he went 0 for 2.
Yeah, he did lead. He is the all-time leader on unintentional walks. So, that's
like in Major League, no, not Major League history of unintentional.
Yes. Career records. Holds career records. Stolen bases, runs, unintentional walks, and leadoff home runs.
Wow.
So it's not even intentional, unintentional. So, that's the kind of eye this guy had standing at home plate. It's just a great ball player. First ballot Hall of Famer.
He was a good fielder, too. He was a good fielder, good defensively on top of it. Yeah.
So, if you would have an all-star team, my leadoff hitter would be Rickey Henderson of all time. If you just I could have my pick of all time. Who would I have as my leadoff batter would probably
you make a great again, like what we were talking about with Hakeem Olajuwon, even though you shot down that argument to an extent, which was fine. Which was fine. If you had an all-time major league team, the greatest lineup you had to do in history, obviously you would put some guys in ahead of Rickey Henderson, like a Joe DiMaggio. I'm just giving examples, okay? Ken Griffey Jr., you probably put a little ahead of him. But if you hands in your lineup card and you leave out some of those legends and put Rickey Henderson in leading off on your all-time team, no one's going to argue with you, say, oh, no, why you put Henderson in instead of them? They might look and say, smart move, Mac. Instead, he would fit in with any all-time great team in a lineup because he would be arguably the biggest threat, leading off what this guy can do. He could lead off with a home run, but if he gets on base, he's going to shake up the whole, the pitcher and the whole team on the field.
The whole defense.
Yeah. And he put
I saved this one for last. I saved this one. No doubt. I saved this for last. Marcus Allen. A great running back. I remember him playing for USC, Heisman Trophy winner. To kind of be ironic, another Heisman Trophy running back winner from USC was O.J. Simpson, and we're going to get to him in a minute. So, Super Bowl champ, Super Bowl MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, 6-time Pro Bowl, rushing leader in 1985. And he did go to the Chiefs and played unbelievable for the Chiefs. Everybody thought pretty much he was done when he played with the Raiders. He wasn't. He goes to the Chiefs.
I don't know, Matt.
Go ahead.
Matt, when he played with the Raiders, he had a big conflict with Al Davis. It wasn't a question that they felt he was washed up, that they moved him to Kansas City and then he revived his career. It was he had a toxic relationship with Al Davis, and it came more from Al Davis's end. For whatever reason, Al Davis couldn't stand Marcus Allen, couldn't stand him. Okay?
It's a good point. I
And
remember
so when he
that
went
now,
to
yeah.
the Chiefs, yeah, it wasn't a question of a player they thought past this peak, and then he surprised, everyone by showing he had a lot left.
That's a great point. I remember that now. I remember him and Davis having that problem. Kind of reminded me of Joe Montana going to the Chiefs and still having something in the tank too. And I mean, that was the Chiefs always get people like that, and we got more on that and the Big Football Show, which we'll do that. But anyway, 12,200 yards rushing, 123 yards touchdowns, 587 reception yards for 5,411 yards, receiving touchdowns. And I mean, the guy was an all-around back. He could catch the ball as you heard, coming out of the backfield, and also a great running back. He had a huge game against the Redskins. I remember him starting one way and everybody going. He just turned direction and went the other way and ran for a touchdown. That was an unbelievable run. Kind of set the tones for the Raiders, really beating up the Redskins that Super Bowl. Pro Football Hall of Fame. And now the interesting stuff when it comes to O.J. Simpson, which I mentioned earlier, both out of USC. I think they were pretty close, if I'm not mistaken. I think they kind of hung out together during Allen's career, if I'm not mistaken. I think I remember that. It could be wrong. But
No, you got the point, Max.
Go ahead, Jack.
Right. No, you mentioning that they hung out together. OJ, how do I describe OJ? Marcus Allen was the new OJ Simpson when Simpson was getting older, towards the end of his career, early in retirement. And, when you're a young superstar and you get older, you can't be a young superstar forever. You lose your stardom and you become a faded athlete and eventually retire. And then you see another young guy come up who's you when you were younger. And OJ didn't take kindly to that. Yeah, he would smile with Marcus Allen, but he had no. It seemed to me, my impression was he had no use for Marcus Allen because he didn't like Marcus Allen as being the new O.J. Simpson. No fault of Marcus, but O.J. had to be, in the forefront, as far as the young dynamic athlete. That was my impression. Not a nice guy, O.J. Simpson, in my view.
He was an actor. I mean, he did those commercials jumping over suitcases. I mean, he had a career going on. I just remember them being alumni, both being from USC. OJ hanging out there at USC with Marcus, and they both, that was their common connection. Of course, there was another common connection that happened later, too, that we're going to get to here. I guess OJ's wife agreed with you that OJ was getting old. She had a new superstar.
No, I don't think that had nothing to do with anything, Max.
I'm just making a joke.
Yeah, and then you're going to say something that's on social media, and you're going to go with it.
No, I'm going to say something. I'm going to say something that happened at the murder trial as the prosecution calls Marcus Allen as a witness because he was having an affair with Nicole.
I don't remember that. I can't say 100% you're wrong. I definitely remember. Google it and look this up, James, okay? Because I don't recall it. It's possible Google it, please.
Not only did I Google it, because you said something before the show, the producer Googled it also and confirmed it. And I know James remembers that he was a witness during that trial, and that's why
they having an affair with
saying
Nicole Simpson. Wait, you said having an affair with Nicole Simpson. Right. Yeah.
Who did I say? Nicole Simpson Brown. If you want to be technical.
I don't think that happened. I don't think that's accurate.
Jack. Okay, you don't think it happened. I know it happened. Linda knows it happened. James knows it happened, but maybe it didn't happen. Anyway, let me finish. So anyway, okay, good. I'm glad you agree with James. Anyway, So that was what they were trying to prove because OJ got so mad and was so jealous and ended up physically, domestically beaten Nicole. Cops were called a few times to the residence, and it was jealousy bought partly by what she was doing outside the marriage. Even though they were divorced or separated at the time, he still thought that, that was his wife and she shouldn't be doing that and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, that's why he was called as a witness to the trial. But again, Marcus Allen, a great running back, a Hall of Famer. And I don't know if you would put him as one of the greatest running backs of all time, but definitely during his time with the Raiders and the Chiefs was one of the greatest on the field. So I don't know. Do you think do you compare him? Would you say he's the greatest running back in Raiders history?
In Raiders history, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I can't think of anyone who was a greater running back in Raider history. I mean, when we talk about the greatest running backs of all time, people don't mention Marcus Allen, but if someone throws Marcus Allen's name in there, it's given a lot of respect. But we don't quite say it's like Barry Sanders or Walter Payton.
No.
Even like Emmitt Smith. He may have been better than Emmitt Smith, but we think career-wise, Emmitt Smith was more, solid over his, whole career. They mentioned Franco Harris. Marcus Allen was more of a threat than Franco Harris, but Franco Harris had a little more consistency over his career. So.
Marcus was a smooth runner. He had the long, slender body. And he was fast. He was deceptively fast. And he could catch the ball out of the backfield as well. As you mentioned, he had 500 catches and 5,000 yards. That's a lot for a running back. But I think part of his career is like unknown because he was or what could have been, because the latter part of his career with the Raiders, he was benched or he wasn't given a lot of playing time because
Al Davis.
Yeah.
Got benched. Yeah, the owner had all the clout. Yeah, it was a toxic relationship. It was. Why would Al Davis then trade him to a rival within their division, the Chiefs? I guess
that's a good question.
The mindset was different in those days, I guess.
That's a great question. And if you think about Raiders running backs, there's really not a great running back besides him. I mean, you had Marv Hubbard, Van Egan.
What could have been with Bo Jackson as well.
Yeah,
Jackson,
right.
Yeah,
right. At peak value, maybe Bo was better. Maybe he was.
Yeah.
Well, that's when we talk about greatness. You mentioned peak value. I could say peak value. Bo Jackson was the greatest running back in NFL history. If I'm talking about peak value, yes, that's very zenith. But he's not a Hall of Famer.
Right.
Because he didn't have the career. But I could say peak value when he was at his absolute zenith, who was better than Bo Jackson in reality, who was more of a threat.
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely be arguable. Definitely. Folks, thanks for tuning in tomorrow. We got the Big Football Show starting at 8 a.m. on YouTube, at 4 p.m. on Roku. We always have this our highest rating show now on a national streaming sports network. Believe it or not, people are tuning in. Over 100 views last week. We're doing really good on that show. So on YouTube, anyway, and not counting all the other Facebooks and what is hundreds and hundreds of plays. But anyway, very successful show. Sunday, you go over all the NFL scores, our college scores, NFL matchups. We do picks. We invite all the people there that are tuning in to give us their picks too. We go over some NFL news. It just covers everything football. And I know a lot of people, this is the time of year to do that. So, and followed at nighttime by NFL Download. We'll have a special guest in for NFL Download. I got Craig Wright, huge Lions fan, coming in with us on NFL Download. Should be a lot of fun. He's a huge Lions fan. Anyway, folks, have a great one. Plenty of shows today, a lot of new shows on the Roku channel today kicking off. Be sure to stay tuned on Roku and check them all out. Have a great one. Stay out of trouble on Saturday, tonight anyway, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.